From the time we're kids, we're taught that being a good person is the key to a good life. Be compassionate, be honest, be kind. These are the virtues that build friendships, families, and communities. We are told they are the universal bedrock of a successful and respectable life. But what if I told you that in the world of leadership, in the brutal arena where power is won and lost, those same virtues could be a one-way ticket to disaster? What if the very qualities that make you a good friend, a good parent, or a good neighbor are the same qualities that will ensure your failure as a leader? This isn't a new or radical idea. In fact, it's a 500-year-old argument that has haunted leaders for centuries, a philosophy so sharp and unsettling that it has been both condemned as a manual for tyrants and praised as the first honest look at political reality. It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. To be a truly great and effective leader, do you first have to learn how to be a terrible person? It might be time to forget what you think you know about morality. Because today we're looking at the ruthless and brutally practical philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli, who argued that to be a great leader, you first have to learn to stop being such a good person. So, to truly grasp Machiavelli's chilling advice, you have to understand the man and the chaotic world that forged him. Niccolò Machiavelli wasn't some cartoon villain cackling in a dark castle, dreaming up evil for its own sake. He was a real person, a brilliant and deeply patriotic civil servant, dealing with a messy, violent world. He was born in Florence in 1469, into an Italy that wasn't a unified country, but a fractured battleground of rival city-states like Venice, Milan, and his own Florence. This was the height of the Renaissance, a time of incredible artistic and intellectual achievement, but also of constant savage warfare. Powerful families, like the infamous Borgias and the banking dynasty of the Medici, ran these states like personal businesses. And foreign powers, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, were always invading, trying to carve up the peninsula for themselves. Alliances shifted like sand, and betrayal wasn't just common, it was a fundamental strategy for survival. Machiavelli entered public life in 1498, at the age of 29, serving the Republic of Florence as a high-level diplomat and secretary to the council, responsible for war and foreign affairs. This was during a rare period when the powerful Medici family had been exiled. For 14 years, Machiavelli traveled on crucial diplomatic missions, an experience that shaped his entire philosophy. He went to the court of King Louis XII in France and saw how a powerful monarch operated. He met with Emperor Maximilian I and noted his weakness and indecisiveness. But most importantly, he had a front-row seat to the meteoric rise of Cesare Borgia, the ambitious and utterly ruthless son of Pope Alexander VI. Borgia was carving out his own state in central Italy through a stunning combination of audacity, strategic violence, and treachery. Machiavelli was both horrified and mesmerized. He saw in Borgia a man who understood how to wield power in a world without rules. But Machiavelli's own career came to a sudden and brutal end. In 1512, with the help of Spanish troops, the Medici family stormed back into Florence, and the Republic collapsed. Machiavelli, as a key official of the old regime, was immediately dismissed. A year later, he was accused of conspiring against the new Medici rulers. He was arrested, thrown in jail, and subjected to the strappado, a horrific form of torture where the prisoner's hands are tied behind their back and they are hoisted into the air by their wrists, dislocating their shoulders. Though eventually released, he was a broken man, banished from his beloved Florence and exiled to his small family farm. It was from this place of total ruin, stripped of his career and his purpose, that he wrote his most famous and infamous work, The Prince. Now, this wasn't some dusty book of abstract philosophy. It was a practical, desperate handbook on how to acquire and maintain power, written as a kind of job application. He dedicated it to Lorenzo de' Medici, the new ruler of Florence, the nephew of the man who had authorized his torture, in a desperate attempt to prove that he, Machiavelli, was the only one who truly understood what it takes to rule. And his central message was a bomb thrown into the heart of Western political thought. The idea that, to save the state, a leader must be willing to sacrifice his own soul. For centuries, Western philosophy had been dominated by a single, powerful idea: a good ruler must be a good man. This tradition, stretching from the ancient Greeks to the Christian thinkers of the Middle Ages, was the unquestioned foundation of political thought. Philosophers like Plato had envisioned an ideal state led by a philosopher king, a ruler whose profound wisdom and moral virtue made him fit to govern. Aristotle, his student, built his entire political framework on the concept of arete, or virtue, arguing that the purpose of the state was to cultivate a virtuous life for its citizens. Later, the Roman statesman Cicero, in his work On Duties, cemented the idea that what is morally right can never be separated from what is politically expedient. For these thinkers, and the Christian philosophers like St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas who followed them, the virtues of a leader, their justice, mercy, honesty, and piety, were the very bedrock of a strong and stable state. Power was a trust granted by God or the natural order of things, and it had to be wielded with moral integrity. Machiavelli, looking at the absolute chaos of 15th century Italy, the endless wars, the betrayals, the states rising and falling overnight, dismissed this entire tradition as naive, dangerous nonsense. He saw a fatal flaw in the classical argument. A leader who is obsessively focused on being morally good at all times is going to be utterly crushed by a world that is not. Think about it with cold, hard logic. If you are a leader who is unfailingly honest in a world filled with liars and deceivers, you will be constantly manipulated and outmaneuvered. Your own commitment to the truth will be used as a weapon against you. If you are a merciful leader surrounded by ruthless competitors who see compassion as a vulnerability, your kindness will be mistaken for weakness and exploited until you have nothing left. Machiavelli's revolutionary insight was that a leader who clings to their personal moral code at all costs won't just bring about their own failure, they will drag their entire state down with them. His primary concern wasn't the leader's soul, but the survival and stability of the state itself, what he called mantenere lo Stato. This became the ultimate good, the highest objective, to which all other considerations must be subordinate. So, what was his solution? It was radical, and to many people, both then and now, it remains terrifying. He argued that you have to completely separate your private morality, the code you live by as an individual, from your public duty as a leader. The actions of a ruler, he insisted, should not be judged by the traditional standards of good or evil. They should be judged by one single ruthless criterion: do they strengthen the state and ensure its survival? This creates what philosophers now call the problem of dirty hands. Can a person lead effectively and morally without getting their hands dirty with acts that would be considered wrong in private life? Machiavelli's answer is a resounding no. He doesn't argue that leaders should be evil for the sake of it. He argues that they must be prepared to use what are traditionally considered vices, deceit, cruelty, manipulation, as tools when necessary for the greater good of the state. If a lie protects the nation, it's a necessary lie. If a swift and brutal act of cruelty prevents a civil war that would kill thousands, it is a necessary cruelty. In this cold new calculus, what makes a good man is not what makes a good leader. In fact, the two are often in direct opposition. This radical separation of public duty from private morality leads us to one of Machiavelli's most chilling and psychologically astute ideas: that a great leader has to become a master of deception by wearing a mask of virtue. Machiavelli was brutally clear about this. A ruler should not actually be good, honest, and compassionate in all situations, but he must always appear to be so to the public. The perception of virtue, he argued, is a far more powerful political tool than virtue itself. He famously wrote in chapter 18 of The Prince, he should appear to be compassionate, faithful to his word, guileless and devout. And indeed, he should be so. But his disposition should be such that, if he needs to be the opposite, he knows how. This is a masterclass in political stagecraft. In other words, you have to project this perfect image of integrity at all times. Show up at the hospital and comfort the sick, give stirring speeches about honesty and faith. Publicly donate to charity. cultivate a reputation for being merciful and just. This is the outward-facing performance of leadership, and it is absolutely essential for winning the loyalty and trust of the people. Because, as Machiavelli cynically observes, most people are simple. They judge leaders based on what they see and the results they get, not by what is actually happening behind the closed doors of power. They are easily fooled by appearances. But behind that mask, the effective leader must be a completely different animal. They must be cold, calculating, and ready to lie, cheat, betray an ally, or break a promise if it is what the survival of the state requires. The mask is for the public, the ruthless pragmatism is for the council room. Why is this deception so critical? Because it allows a leader to have the best of both worlds. The public's love and admiration, which is built on the appearance of virtue, provides a stable foundation of support. But the private willingness to act without moral restraint is what allows the leader to navigate the treacherous world of politics and defeat their enemies. A leader who is genuinely honest all the time has no strategic flexibility. A leader who is openly ruthless will be hated, and a hated ruler is constantly vulnerable to conspiracies and rebellion. The trick is to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is why Machiavelli declares, without flinching, that a successful ruler must be a great liar and a deceiver. It's a dark thought, isn't it? The idea that public relations is more powerful than moral reality, that the most successful leaders are the best actors. Yet, from the carefully curated photo opportunities of modern presidents to the calculated press releases of CEOs, this insight into the power of perception feels just as relevant today as it was in the 16th century. To truly understand what Machiavelli is proposing, you have to realize that he took the word virtue and completely hijacked it, giving it a new, dangerous and powerful meaning. Before Machiavelli, as we've seen, virtue was synonymous with moral goodness. It meant possessing qualities like justice, wisdom, temperance, and honesty, the characteristics of a good Christian or a good citizen. Machiavelli looked at this definition and saw it as useless for a leader, so he introduced his own distinct concept, virtue. This new concept, virtue, has almost nothing to do with being nice or morally upright. The word itself comes from the Latin vir, meaning man, and it embodies a set of forceful, masculine qualities: bravery, decisiveness, ambition, cunning, and most importantly, the strength and willingness to be ruthless when circumstances demand it. It's not a moral quality, it's a political skill set. It is the raw talent that allows a leader to recognize and seize opportunities, to impose order on a chaotic world, and to shape events to their will. For Machiavelli, a leader with virtue judges every action based on a single pragmatic test: the outcome. Does it work? Does it secure my power? Does it make the state safer? To fully grasp virtue, you must understand its eternal adversary, fortuna or fortune. Machiavelli believed that fortune, a capricious and unpredictable force, governs half of all human affairs, but the other half, he insisted, is left up to us to control through our virtue. He uses a powerful metaphor to explain this relationship. Fortune is like a raging river which, when it floods, sweeps away everything in its path. When fortune is angry, nothing can stop it. But Machiavelli argues, a man of virtue does not wait for the flood. In times of calm, he builds dams, dikes, and channels to prepare for the river's fury. That way, when the floodwaters of fortune inevitably rise, their damage is minimized, and the flow might even be redirected to his advantage. A leader without virtue simply stands on the riverbank and gets washed away. So, under this new definition, a traditionally good act, like being generous with the state's money, could be a sign of poor virtue if it drains the treasury and weakens the state in the long run. Conversely, a traditionally evil act, like executing the leaders of a rebellion with calculated cruelty, could be an expression of great virtue if it secures the state and prevents a wider civil war. Machiavelli even offers a nuanced view on cruelty, arguing for an economy of violence. He suggests that if cruel acts are necessary, they should be well used. That is, performed all at once, swiftly and decisively to achieve their objective, and then stopped. This shocks the population into obedience, but allows them to forget and return to normal life. Badly used cruelty, which is constant, nagging, and arbitrary, only breeds hatred and instability. He wasn't telling leaders to be evil for the fun of it. He was arguing that vices are just tools. And a leader with true virtue must be willing to use every tool in the box to serve the ultimate good of the state. This entire terrifying philosophy, the separation of morality from politics, the mask of virtue, the concept of virtue, all comes together in Machiavelli's famous answer to one of history's greatest leadership questions. Is it better to be feared or loved? Every leader, Machiavelli admits, would want to be both. To be both loved by your people and feared by your enemies is the ideal state. But, he says, it is incredibly difficult to unite these two qualities. If you must choose only one, do not even hesitate. It is much, much safer for a leader to be feared than to be loved. His logic is cold, clinical, and based on his deeply pessimistic view of human nature. Love, he argues, is a bond of obligation, and because human beings are naturally selfish, fickle, and ungrateful, they will break that bond of love whenever it is convenient for them. Love is unreliable because it depends on the goodwill of others, which you cannot control. Fear, on the other hand, is a much more dependable emotion. It is held in place by the dread of punishment, a feeling that never goes away. A leader who is loved but not feared will be abandoned the moment he asks his people to make a real sacrifice. A boss who avoids tough, unpopular decisions because they want to be liked by their employees will watch as discipline and productivity collapse. In Machiavelli's world, fear is simply a more reliable, more durable foundation for power. However, this is where most people misread Machiavelli and stop listening. His argument is far more subtle than just rule by terror. He adds a crucial and often overlooked warning. A leader must be feared, but must, at all costs, avoid being hated. Fear keeps people obedient, but hatred inspires them to conspire and rebel. A hated leader is never safe. So how does a feared leader avoid becoming a hated one? Machiavelli is very specific. The leader must do two things: do not take your subjects' property and do not take their women. He famously writes that men forget more quickly the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony. As long as the leader's use of fear is seen as a tool for maintaining order and not as a means of personal, predatory enrichment, the people will tolerate it. To prove his point, he contrasts two great historical generals. He criticizes the Roman general Scipio, Africanus, for being too lenient and humane with his troops, which Machiavelli claims led to indiscipline and mutiny. In contrast, he praises Hannibal of Carthage, whose inhuman cruelty kept a vast and diverse mercenary army completely united and disciplined, even in the most difficult of circumstances, without ever sparking a rebellion. Hannibal, in Machiavelli's eyes, was a master of the economy of fear. He was brutal but respected, feared but not hated, and that is the razor's edge that every effective leader must walk. For 500 years, leaders in politics, war, and business have debated these seductive and disturbing ideas. It's easy to look at the world, see ruthless people get ahead and think, yep, Machiavelli nailed it. His analysis of power, his understanding that politics is often a brutal and amoral game, feels instinctively true because we see examples of it every day. But here's the billion-dollar question. Does his 16th century advice actually work as a prescription for leadership in today's world? The overwhelming evidence from decades of modern leadership and organizational research says, no, not really. While Machiavelli's diagnosis of power dynamics remains brilliant, his proposed cure is dangerously outdated. Study after study in organizational psychology and management has shown that the very qualities he advised leaders to cast aside, empathy, authenticity, and ethical behavior, are not weaknesses in the 21st century economy. They are enormous competitive assets. We now know that ethical and empathetic leaders build deep, resilient trust. And it is trust, not fear, that is the true engine of success in modern teams and organizations. Machiavelli saw fear as a reliable tool to ensure compliance. But modern workplaces have proven that a culture of fear is toxic. Fear kills creativity and innovation because people are too scared to take risks or propose new ideas. It completely shuts down honest feedback, because employees won't dare tell a feared leader the truth about problems. This encourages everyone to hide mistakes until it's far too late to fix them. A feared leader gets, at best, grudging compliance. A trusted leader, on the other hand, gets genuine commitment and engagement. In a world where success depends on collaboration, rapid problem-solving, and attracting and retaining top talent, a Machiavellian approach is a recipe for long-term failure. This doesn't mean that modern leaders are supposed to be pushovers. This is a common misunderstanding of what compassionate leadership means. True compassionate leadership isn't about avoiding conflict or tough decisions. It's about having the moral strength and emotional intelligence to make those difficult calls. Whether it's layoffs, strategic pivots, or holding people accountable, with fairness, transparency, and genuine respect for the people they affect. This is sometimes called radical candor, the ability to care personally while you challenge directly. This approach doesn't create chaos. It builds a resilient culture where people feel a sense of psychological safety. They feel safe enough to take risks and innovate, and responsible enough to deliver results. In the end, the Machiavellian path of fear and deception might offer a short-term strategy. Sustainable, long-term success in our interconnected world is built on a foundation of trust. So where does that leave us with this brilliant, dangerous man? Machiavelli gave us a chillingly practical look at power, stripped of all its noble pretenses. He presented a world where appearing good is a political tool and actual morality is a potential liability. His philosophy forces us to ask timeless, uncomfortable questions about what we are willing to do to achieve our goals and protect our communities. And his cold-mind analysis of how fear, deception, and self-interest work in the corridors of power is just as relevant and disturbing today as it was 500 years ago. But his central prescription, that you have to cast aside goodness to be an effective leader, has been largely proven wrong by the modern world. While the dark path of power that he mapped out is very real, it is no longer the best or most effective path to take. The nature of our society and our economy has changed. Modern leadership has shown that lasting success in the 21st century is not built on fear and deception, but on integrity, compassion, and trust. The best leaders today don't just wear the mask of virtue, they genuinely strive to live it, understanding that their character is their most valuable asset. They prove that you don't have to be a terrible person to be a great leader. In fact, in our world, it's nearly impossible to be a truly great leader without also being a good one. So what do you think? Is Machiavelli's advice a timeless guide to the unchangeable realities of power, or is it a dangerous relic that the modern world has finally debunked? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy untangling complex ideas about power, philosophy, and leadership, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what's next.